Coming up on the FSr Sarc Fighter Podcast, Wade Tomlinson's lungs were so racked with sarcoidosis, he needed a transplant. And he got it.
When I would get out of bed, I would just sit on the edge of bed and I would just cough. And I would go to the restroom, and just going that short distance from the bed to the restroom was just, it was as if I had just ran a marathon, you know?
Wade takes us along as he waited for a lung donor.
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm not going to lie.
His story is coming up.
This is the Sarc Fighter Podcast, living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
Well, hello, everyone. I am John Carlin, your host for the FSr Sarc Fighter Podcast. Hope you're feeling as well as you can be today if you are somewhere here in the sarcoidosis space. I do this podcast to help you understand what's going on with you, to give you some perspective on sarcoidosis, which can be hard to get. There's not a lot of good information out there if you're just kind of clicking around the internet and you're trying to figure out, well, how bad is my case? How good is my case? How serious is my situation? And then at the end of the day, to let you know that people are dealing with it, that they are finding a way forward, that FSR is finding solutions, and that medical science is beginning to find solutions. And so we cover all of that here, and as try to just give you a good, honest lay of the land as you deal with this unpredictable disease. And today, I have a return visit from Sarc fighter Wade Tomlinson. His sarcoidosis went from bad to worse as his lungs just pretty much gave up, despite the fact that on some days he was walking like 10 miles.
And then they all get together in a single room. They discuss your case and they say, yes, you're a candidate. We we don't think you're going to survive this, or we're going to hold you at this point. So I didn't know what they were going to decide.
So more from Wade is coming up. Also today, a new voice from FSR is joining me here, Stephanie Mizell, not only fighting sarcoidosis herself, but she now works for FSR as a graphic designer and social media strategist. And she's here to talk about a new fundraiser that's already underway. And this is September of 2024. And it is a way to raise some money, win some prizes, and help out FSR. And I'm going to bring Stephanie in right now. At this time, I want to welcome Stephanie Mizell from FSR, the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research, to the podcast, because Stephanie, you've got a great initiative here for the month of September in 2024, and it's already off and running. Tell me about it.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Thank you for the warm welcome. In the month of September, we are doing a 100-mile challenge, cycling for sarcoidosis, where we are challenging community and patients and supporters and whoever wants to hop on their bike, whether that's stationary or on a trail or in the gym or whatever that looks like, and ride 100 miles in the month while raising funds for sarcoidosis patients.
So how does that, I mean, I know how the bike riding works. But how does it happen? How do you track the mileage and raise the money, and where's the money go? Are you going into a KISS account, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, so we are using Facebook. This is all through Facebook for this particular challenge. And you sign up via a link on Facebook that we have on our page. And you put in your name and your information so that way we can ship you some fun incentives if you hit these goals, which I'll talk about in a second. Okay. And this is kind of the what's it called, the honor system. So when you're tracking your miles, you are doing that on your own. And we trust that you are, completing those. We love to hear updates and we love to see pictures. We have once you commit to the challenge, there's a Facebook group you can join and share your pictures, your rides, get encouragement, motivation, have mini challenges, ride together with somebody else and that sort of thing. So right now we've been seeing people hit some, 12-mile goals, 3-mile goals just in the first 6 days. We're really happy with that. And they're also hitting a lot of fundraising goals. I think we have 13 people that have already raised over $100 each. which means they get to receive the purple bike / safety light. That's going to be branded with sarcoidosis awareness on it, as a fun incentive that can clip to your bike or your bag or on your wrist, depending on where you want to put it. The versatility of that is for bikers and stationary bikers as well. So yeah, it's been really exciting thus far. Lots of bikers in this community, as you are yourself.
Right, right. And 100 miles a month is my goal, and I've got a long streak of months going back for years and years where I have done that. And so I shared with you that I've had a little bit of surgery on my ear, not related to sarcoidosis, but my doctors don't want me to blow my stitches out by going out and doing something, where I'm going to exert myself. But I don't know. This sounds too tempting. So how does it work? How do you sign up? Where do you go? And what are these incentives?
Yeah, we can tag a link here, on the podcast page to the sign
Okay.
up. And you track your own 100 miles, which I think breaks down to like 3 miles a day, or you can do 10 miles, twice a week, or I guess it's 25 a week, right?
Right. 25.
Or you can do 100 all at once. I think that was their plan, to do 100 miles all in one ride. So
Wow.
it's really kind of at your own pace and that sort of thing. And then fundraising wise, once you sign up, it's all prompting you to create your fundraising page and share it. You'll get your own custom URL. You can put in, your reason for joining, whether you're a patient or a supporter or a caregiver or whatever your connection to sarcoidosis is, or if there isn't one, just about yourself. So that's all prompted, and then you'll get a welcome email, and in that welcome email is some links to the Facebook group, some tips and tricks, and ways to stay motivated. And then there's weekly emails that go out for encouragement, and we just hope people will share it with their friends and family and kind of all come together. And if you can't ride, you could support a rider. So there's always that. Or for myself, I have 2 people riding in my honor. So I'm very thankful for those people. My mom and one of my good friends are both taking on the 100-mile challenge to raise awareness for sarcoidosis that way. And yeah, there's a lot of different ways to connect with this.
That's awesome. Why did you choose biking?
That was a long conversation. We had, we've been working on a plan for this for a while, and coming up with engaging ways to, spread awareness, bring awareness, but while also with a purpose. And there is just a lot of cyclists in our community, and it seemed fitting, some of the challenges we were going to do, we were just like, what's the connection here? And so finally it just was like, this is so much simpler than we thought. It's September. It's going to be the best time to get outdoors. It's not going to be 115 degrees outside, and why not encourage that? And so that's kind of how we landed on it. But we definitely will be having other challenges similar to this, doing other things as well soon too.
Okay. All right. Well, make sure that you keep me posted on this stuff so that I can get it out there in front of the audience on the Sarc Fighter podcast.
Absolutely.
All right. So is there anything else that you want people to know about this other than go get them, go do it, go support a cyclist?
Honestly, if you can't support a cyclist or aren't a cyclist yourself, it's always spreading awareness is also the goal. So sharing a fact about sarcoidosis is helpful. Saying sarcoidosis, sharing the website, any of that, the more you say it, the more, that awareness spreads. So I would say that's another way, the most simple way to help.
All right. Let me ask you one final question, because you're a social media strategist, right? And when I do my sarcoidosis posts, I'm always looking for the perfect hashtag. And so I do hashtag sarcoidosis, and Instagram prompts me and Facebook prompts me. But is there one that really gets it going, that works?
So we use hashtag stop sarcoidosis for everything we possibly can. And then for this challenge, we're doing hashtag 100-mile challenge, hashtag cycling for sarcoidosis, and hashtag sarcoidosis. So, the sarcoidosis hashtag in itself brings up an incredible amount of information.
Yeah.
So that's always, there, but then tailored to more accurate information, is FSR's at the stop sarcoidosis hashtag, because that's really more associated with, accurate stuff. Anybody can say anything on the internet. So
Right.
you
Right.
got to be careful with that. But I think both of those hashtags are really good to find information online.
Okay. So I'm pretty much doing it right then.
Yeah, I would say you are. I see your stuff, John. So
Okay.
I think you're doing pretty good. I know about boomers, cycling for boomers, or
Biking for
biking
boomers. Right. Yes. Yes. I'm wearing my Alaska hat today, and I'm working on a biking for boomers video. We rode about 100 miles in Alaska in a week. So,
Wow.
but it was in August, so it doesn't count for this fundraiser.
It doesn't, but
Uh,
Alaska is an incredible place.
Yeah, I could go on forever, but I don't want to digress. Well, thank you for getting this initiative going, and thanks for everything you're doing for FSR.
Yes, thank you so much, John.
Thanks to Stephanie for putting this together for FSR. Let's pitch in and either do a ride ourselves, or maybe this is the motivation you need to get out on your bicycle or support someone else who is riding. And I'll put a link in the show notes to help get you started. And by the way, Stephanie has agreed to join me on a future episode to talk about her particular situation as a Sarc fighter and what she's dealing with sarcoidosis. And this is a good point for me to tell you that you guys know that I love to ride my bike, and that I might be the first to jump on an opportunity, a fundraiser like this. But I've had a bit of a setback not related to sarcoidosis. So I have had a basal cell carcinoma growing on the back of my ear for several years now, and I am guilty of neglecting it. It's hard to get, this is my excuse, it's hard to get an appointment with a dermatologist. I didn't have a dermatologist. A lot of them here where I live aren't even taking patients anymore, but eventually I got in. She looked at it, did a test, said, yes, it's basal cell. So the good news is that it's not going to spread to the rest of your body. The bad news is it does have to be removed surgically. So I went to see the surgeon, and he told me that I would need plastic surgery to repair my ear, because it was going to be a pretty big dig, if you will. And then after he got in there and actually started to remove the basal cell, something called a Mohs surgery, where they remove it, they look under a microscope, they remove some more, and they keep on removing pieces of your flesh until they are convinced that there's nothing left. There was a huge chunk of my ear missing, which means that I now have had the chunk removed and the first round of plastic reconstructive surgery done. And as I sit here today, 3 weeks from now, I will have to have phase 2, because they couldn't do it all at once because the chunk was just so big. I don't want to gross you out or anything like that, but the bottom line is that they've told me not to do anything strenuous, which means don't ride my bike. And then 3 weeks from now, I have to have phase 2, and they're going to say, don't do anything strenuous, which means don't ride your bike. And I'm kind of half decided that I'm going to listen to them, and I've kind of half decided that I'm going to ride my bike at least easily. So I don't really know. The bottom line is I'm going to be fine. My ear eventually will be fine. It feels really weird right now, and because of the way they're doing this, they've got a bunch of stitches in my ear. It's actually, I know this may sound gross, but they've sewn my ear to the side of my scalp, because they're trying to grow some skin, which they can then fold over to use to reconstruct my ear so it looks more normal. And don't forget, I'm a television news anchor, so yeah, I don't want to have this really distracting ear. So everybody's looking at my ear and not thinking about what I'm saying about the news. So we're trying to do it right, but that's a long way of saying, man, it's a lot worse than I ever thought it would be in terms of getting this basal cell thing removed. And secondly, I might not participate in this fundraiser, but I'm glad Stephanie is doing it. And maybe I'll ride the exercise bike inside and not get my heart rate up too high where I can control it. I don't know. However, let me tell you that don't worry about supporting me. If I do this, I probably will sign up and I'll make a donation myself, and I'll put it out there on Facebook. Maybe some other people who know me will give some money to FSR. But I do want to talk about some bike riding that I did do. And again, this all goes back to me deciding when I was diagnosed with sarcoidosis and then had that major flare back, and it's been 2018 now, and went through a whole terrible 2019 that you've heard me discuss with all the medications and the chemo and all the stuff they were trying to do to burn this out. I decided, man, there are some places I want to see on this earth. The first thing was the Grand Canyon, because I'd never been. So I went to the Grand Canyon. Another place was Alaska. And so my wife and I have been saving and planning, and Mary and I joined another couple who are friends of ours, and we went on a biking, hiking, glacier exploring, and kayaking adventure for a week, starting in Anchorage, Alaska. And I'm just going to share just the most incredible bike ride of my life that I did. So first of all, let me tell you that the last week in August is no longer summer in Alaska as we know it in the lower 48, okay? It was chilly. It was rainy. Apparently, August is the rainiest month in Alaska, and I can tell you that most of the tourists were already gone. So we were heading into parking lots where there was nobody there or lots of open parking spaces. But having said that, it was fantastic. And the best day of bike riding was just full of surprises that I couldn't even anticipate. So very quickly, we were dropped off at a place called Worthington Glacier, and the goal was to ride about 40 to 50 miles to the town of Valdez. Now, if you remember the Exxon Valdez, the oil tanker crisis, that's the Valdez we're talking about. Beautiful little fishing village right there on Prince William Sound. So we were going to ride to Valdez from this glacier. We got out of the van. I was wearing about every piece of bike clothing that I had because it was, I think right there, it was 41 degrees and it was a steady rain. Not pouring down, but it was a steady rain. And so getting out of the van and getting on a bicycle didn't seem like exactly what I wanted to do right then. But we paid for this trip and everybody else was getting out of the van and doing it. So by God, we got out of the van and we did it too. We got on the bikes and it was a long, miserable climb to the top of this mountain. And I want to say I was climbing on the bike for about 45 minutes and I was off the back. I'm not going to lie. We had some strong riders in the group. My wife, Mary, and her girlfriend, Karen, were on e-bikes, so they zipped right up it. The other guy who was riding with us in our group of 4 is a much better bike rider than me. He was long gone, so here I am climbing. The rain's in my face. I'm not very happy. I'm just not happy. And then we had a lunch stop scheduled, so I thought, well, I'll go inside and warm up. No, it's in a picnic shelter. And it's still 40 some odd degrees and it's outside. And, the lunch was nice, but I thought, oh, no chance to warm up. But then after lunch, we started riding again. It's still raining, still cold, but there's an 8-mile downhill. And the roads are long and straight, unlike what they are here in Virginia. If you've got an 8-mile downhill here, it's twisty. You've got to be careful going around the corners. Here, it's just straight downhill for as far as you can see. And this is one of my favorite things to do on a bike. I'm actually pretty good at it, even compared to some of the better riders around here. I can ride a bike downhill. So I just tucked and let it rip. And I'm going down this hill 40, 45 miles an hour and loving it. I mean, just loving it. And way off in the distance, I can see this waterfall. And it's getting closer and closer and closer. So I stop to take a photo. By this point, I'm way ahead of everybody else. And they catch up and we're taking pictures. And then we entered a place called Keystone Canyon. And now there are waterfalls on either side of the road. I looked it up because I wouldn't have been able to tell you standing there, except they're just jaw-dropping. And they're estimated at 400 to 600 feet tall. And these are robust waterfalls, okay? And you really can't believe what you're seeing. And aside from the occasional RV that was pulled over beside the road, and I mean occasional, we were the only ones there. So we're on our bicycles, we're out there in the elements, it's raining, but we're no longer even aware of it, and we're just gawking and taking pictures of these unbelievable waterfalls. And you'd pass one, and then all of a sudden there'd be another overlook, and there's another one and another one. It was amazing. And the guides had set up a route that day that also would take us off of our route a little bit to go to a salmon hatchery along Prince William Sound. It's called the Solomon Gulch Hatchery. And I've been to a ton of fish hatcheries in my life. Let's face it, I'm a fish guy. I love fishing, and I've been to a lot of hatcheries. And the hatchery process where they raise the roe and release the fry isn't all that interesting, but I thought, okay, they told us to go see it, I'll go see it. And then as we approached, we began to see like thousands and thousands of seagulls. And then we looked out, and there was water to our right, turned out to be a tributary of Prince William Sound. And we saw seals, thought they were sea otters at first, but they were what they call harbor seals. And then we started seeing sea lions swimming in the water, spread out, these like 9-10 foot long creatures swimming in the water beside us. And then we get to the hatchery itself, and it is just amazing because the salmon were running. Again, this is the last week of August. These were the pink salmon, in particular, species of salmon that were running. And they were so thick you could just about walk across the water on their backs. Just shoulder to shoulder to shoulder salmon. And there were sea lions shoulder to shoulder to shoulder feeding on the salmon. And there's no tourists. We've got the place, you can walk right up and you're first in line. And I'm taking pictures of these sea lions gorging on the salmon, and the seagulls by the hundreds of thousands are just everywhere feeding on the bits of salmon that are being dislodged or chewed up by the sea lions. A lot of times there are grizzly bears there, but there weren't at this time. And the thing is it was this true sense of discovery, because I didn't know that we were going to see that. I didn't know we would see the waterfalls. They just told us to look for waterfalls. Okay. And you have this sense of discovery. Then you discover this evolving ecosystem with salmon. So, yeah, once again, this was the most epic and I can say the best bike ride of my life. Before that, I would have said it was pre-sarcoidosis for me, and we were riding up a famous highway called the Going to the Sun Road in Glacier National Park in Montana. But this actually trumped that. It really was. And what makes a bike ride epic? Well, I think it has to be difficult. You've got to overcome something maybe that you didn't want to or didn't anticipate having to overcome. In this case, it was two things. It was the rain and the cold. The weather was one thing. And then the climb, that climb right out of the van, which was very difficult. And then the scenery and the expectations and not knowing what you were going to see, and then just getting your mind blown. Either the waterfalls or the salmon hatchery would have been enough by itself, and then to have both in one ride, it was really, really amazing. So I won't bore you with all of that, but I will tell you that I'm putting together I've got a YouTube channel called Biking for Boomers, because there's a ton of baby boomers out there like me who like to ride their bikes. And even if you're not a baby boomer, maybe you'd want to go along. And it'll probably take me another couple of weeks to put that edit together. But I basically vlogged my way, video blogging my way across Alaska, and you'll be able to check that out if you're interested in it. And I'll let you know when it's ready to go. But right now, I appreciate you just listening to me as I recount how once again I socked it to sarcoidosis by checking something else off my bucket list, and did that despite the fact that I'm dealing with all the issues that I have with sarcoidosis, and I hope that you have the chance to attack your bucket list as well. All right. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I appreciate all the great comments that I get, and it does help me reach more people if you just tell one other person about the FSr Sarc Fighter Podcast. Share it somewhere in the sarcoidosis space and let people know what we're doing here. All right, coming up, Wade joins me. He's going to talk about how he went from walking around happy and free of major symptoms to a hospital bed and a new lung. And you're going to want to listen to his story. That's coming up next here on the FSr Sarc Fighter Podcast.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the Sarc Fighter Podcast. You may be wondering, what can I do to help? How can I be a part of the sarcoidosis solution? It's simple. Make a donation to KISS, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. 100% of the money goes to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Look for a link in the show notes of the Sarc Fighter Podcast. Welcome back to the FSr Sarc Fighter Podcast. Joining me once again is Wade Tomlinson, who is up in New England. Wade, you are in Connecticut, correct?
That is correct.
And you are coming off of a lung transplant. Is that how long ago?
So I was interviewed on episode 81,
Yeah.
and I had sarcoidosis, and I just to back up, so 1/3 of sarcoidosis patients, it goes in remission, it's fine. 1/3, it gets a little worse, but it still stabilizes. I was hoping I was in that class. The last third of us get to a point where we are so sick that we would die without medical intervention. And I'll go through the whole process of how to become a lung transplant candidate, which is not easy.
Yeah.
But yes, I received a single lung transplant almost 6 months ago.
6 months ago. I mean, folks, you can't see Wade, but he's bright-eyed, he's bushy-tailed, he's been out hiking. That seems like a remarkable recovery time to me.
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm not going to lie. Lung transplant is not for everybody. A lot of the people I was in the ICU with were really suffering. I don't have any other comorbidities. So a lot of the people you have interviewed have talked about things like diabetes or asthma or other comorbidities that they struggle with. I am really fortunate that the only thing that seemed to be really wrong with me was my pulmonary sarcoidosis. That was it. So my recovery, I'm a 50-year-old man. That's another thing. Many people who get transplants are much older and have a much more difficult time coming out of it because they're just not strong enough. I kept being told by the nurses that I was kind of a miracle candidate, that not only did I take it, but that I recovered very quickly. I didn't feel like I was recovering very quickly. It is a hard process to get through. And I was like, you think this is easy? Wow. Okay. But I went through the process, and another thing I think I did that I think some candidates I've been told don't do is I did everything the doctors asked me to do. So I remember my doctor sitting down with me and he's like, if you don't take your medication, you will die.
Hmm.
Full stop. And I was like, that made an impression upon me. I was like, yes,
Well,
well,
you
then
would
I'm going
think,
to
yeah.
take
You
my
would,
medication. And he said, yes, there's some people who come out of this thinking that they're invulnerable and they just stop taking their medication. And yeah, that can lead to problems. So I really, that's another thing, is everything they've asked me to do, no matter what, if it is like blood work, x-rays, whatever, I step up and I just do it.
yeah. All right. So I want to get a little bit to the backstory with you. You were an avid mountain biker, avid hiker, outdoors person, and you started feeling, this was way back in like 2015, I want to say, if I
2014.
remember.
Yeah,
Yep. And
2014.
and all of a sudden you were having a hard time doing the stuff you had always done. You
Yeah.
were having to push your bike up hills that you used to ride easily. And so you started looking for what was wrong with you.
Yeah.
And through a series of doctors and tests and misdiagnoses, eventually they got to sarcoidosis. That was when.
That was March of 2014. And I
Okay.
had my operation in March of 2024, exactly 10 years, almost to the day when I was diagnosed.
And but one of the things that happened with you was you had a lot of scarring in your lungs, and
Yes.
you went on and off prednisone multiple times. You were irritable. You got the moon face. You had all
Yep.
the things that all of us who've had the
That's right.
prednisone treatment complain about.
Yep.
Um, and you eventually just stopped taking medication. Is that right?
Yeah. So it wasn't that I was just irritable. I was just grumpy and angry all the time.
Yeah.
It actually took a toll on my marriage too. Like I just had to do a lot of apologizing because I would just get angry at the tip of a hat for no reason. And I just got to a point where I was like, I can't live like this. I had a new child. So we have two children, and I was just a grumpy old grump.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I stopped taking the medication after a while. It just it ruined my lifestyle and was ruining my relationships. I was even grumpy with my sister for no reason. So yeah, it really strained some relationships. So in 2018, I stopped taking the prednisone for about 6 months.
And as I recall from our last interview, you'd kind of convinced yourself that you were self-resolving, that you didn't need
Yeah.
anything anymore. Um, and I guess at some point you came to the conclusion that that was not the case.
Well, I had a big flare. Yeah, and once I had the flare, I realized I couldn't even go up a half a staircase without like, nearly passing out. So I was like, oh, this is so different. It was definitely a significant flare. I went to a pulmonologist. He took a CAT scan and X-ray, and he's like, "Oh my God, you are in deep trouble." And it really scared me. I remember sitting in the parking lot talking to my dad, just crying, like, "Oh, a lung transplant." Like he mentioned lung transplant. Like, what? Like I didn't know it was that bad. I thought I was still at that time, hiking 15, 20,000 steps. I was still doing what I thought was right. But yeah, that jolted me, and I got right back on the prednisone. They tried methotrexate, that didn't work for me. We tried different infusions, and infliximab seemed to work a little bit, but yeah, it was clear nothing was really truly working.
Infliximab is Remicade, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just so people listening know, I've been through all those different things that you just mentioned. I can relate. So, but you are a walker, a hiker, and 20,000 steps a day is how many miles?
So my stride, it's a little over 2,000 steps per mile. So 20,000 steps is just under 10 miles.
And you were doing that pretty much every day.
Yeah, I was trying to. Yeah.
And you work at a small private school in New England in Connecticut. And
Hmm.
so there's just kind of sort of like hillsides and nice trails and dirt roads around the school. And that's where you were walking, as I recall.
Yeah, I have a unique area. I have Devil's Hop Yard just down the way, Gillette Castle State Park, which is just up the way. I mean, Makamuda State Park. I am really in the center of a lot of beautiful state parks right next to the Connecticut River. midway between Hartford and the coast, the beach. So I'm very, very fortunate and to be in this kind of area with lakes and rivers and waterfalls. And yeah, that's my cathedral. That's my spirituality, is to go out in nature. And in fact, I did that yesterday. I hiked 19,000 steps, which was, I think, a high since my operation. I think that's the most I've done
Congratulations.
since then. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm slowly getting back, and 6 months is a big milestone for the lung transplant people. Once you get to the 6 months, you kind of, if you're still doing really well, you're I don't want to say you're destined to do well, but you're out of the danger zone.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Of course, there's always the possibility of rejection whenever you have any kind of an organ transplant. Now, what drug are you taking to prevent the rejection?
There's three of them. There's something called mycophenolate, also called Cellcept, which
Yeah.
so this would be very familiar to anybody who's had a transplant, kidney or other. It's the same three. Uh, I'm on 10 milligrams of prednisone, so I'm still on prednisone. But when you come out of surgery, I was on like 80. So you're a very high dose at first, and then you come down. And the third, oh God, it just escaped me. I can picture it, but I can't remember the third one right now. But there's three drugs that all transplant patients have. They bring down your immunity, and I'm very fortunate that I just got another test in late August, and I'm at 0% rejection, which is really rare. Usually,
Holy
what I've
cow.
been told is that it's normal to have 1 to 5% rejection, and then they have to mess with your meds a little bit. But I'm at 0%. So again, I'm very, very fortunate.
Did they say it might be because you're so active? I
No,
no. Just
doctors
lucky.
love to be very vague. I think I love my doctors, but it's really hard sometimes to get direct answers because, they're like, well, it could be this, it could be that. Like, they're never definitive.
Okay. All right. So I want to go back to the story here because I feel like after our last interview, you said something to the effect of, I'm feeling pretty good. I think this activity is good for me. And, I think maybe I've got this sarcoidosis thing beat. All of a sudden, I get an email from you that says, uh, I just had a lung transplant. So what
Yeah.
happened?
Well, I was plateauing, so I felt like the infusions, they weren't making me better, but I wasn't getting worse. I was really on a plateau. And in early September, a lot of people at my school got COVID. I was the last staff member to not have it, and then I got it. Once I got COVID, and I was being really careful, very judicious, wearing a mask. Once I got it, I just went straight downhill. I mean, it was precipitous. And I'm lucky that I had begun the process to become a lung transplant candidate because I already had some of the tests behind me. So I just had some to get out in front of me. And again, I can explain that process. I would
Yeah.
love to do it for listeners because I think for those of us at 1/3 category where we're on the plateau and then we skid to nearly nothing, it's good to know that there is an option out there for those of us um, who are very afraid of dying, because I was dying. I went from, what was it, 30% lung, um, uh, what is it called?
Capacity.
Lung capacity
Yeah.
to less than 15%.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Wow.
was dying. And I was dying very quickly. I might get a little emotional because it was just so precipitous. It was so fast. It got to a point where when I get out of bed, I would just sit on the edge of bed and I would just cough, and I would go to the restroom, and just going that short distance from the bed to the restroom was just uh it was as if I had just ran a marathon. It
Wow.
was horrible. Uh, so I was in really, really bad shape. My precipitous slide was just, it took me by surprise at how quickly I got to a point where I could not walk. I had to keep working, for healthcare. That's how our country is. So I had to keep my healthcare. So I kept showing up. I did my school gave me some allowances. So I kind of did the absolute minimum that I had to do. And, and then, yeah, I kept working. So from September to March is when I kept that 6 month period. I just did everything I could do to just put one foot in front of the other.
That is so difficult. And COVID was the trigger. Of course, a lot of people wound up with COVID being in that same situation without having
Yeah.
had additional complication of sarcoidosis. So you are out there, you're talking to your doctors. What are the conversations like?
Well, I'd like to just describe what it takes to become a candidate. So you have to do a lot of tests. They want to make sure that every single organ in your body is working and working optimally so that you can survive the stress and the trauma of going through a lung transplant. So one of the tests I remember very vividly was something called a heart catheterization, and they put a wire through your wrist and with a camera, and it goes all the way through from your wrist all the way into your heart. And they're supposed to put you asleep. And the reason I remember this is because they told me the procedure, I was in the gown, they're going to put me to sleep. Okay, I'm looking forward to going to sleep. And I remember telling them in the middle of it, I was like, guys, I'm still awake. And the doctor said, okay, give him, 100 more cc's of XYZ. And I'm like, no, I'm still awake.
No
I'm
way.
still here. But they did it. It was not a pleasant procedure, and my wrist hurt for months afterwards. But that was just one. So they test your heart, they test your liver, they test everything to make sure that everything is going to be able to survive the transplant. And there is so I tried to become a candidate at UPenn, Temple, and New York Presbyterian at Columbia University. I was well on my way to Temple. I'd already completed New York Presbyterian. But there is no compromise. It's not like, oh, well, you can't do this. So they have their standards, and you must meet their standards to the letter. And there's no deviation. Like there's no, we're going to work with you on this or whatever. It's like you have to, jump through these hurdles, and then we will consider you to be a candidate.
So you're a candidate. Are you in one big computer system, or does each hospital have its own?
Each one has its own. Some hospitals are more difficult to work with than others. And some staff members are more difficult to work with than others. I will say New York Presbyterian Hospital has been fantastic. They treated me like a human. I felt they had a good bedside manner, let's put it that way. And I felt like I was in good hands.
That's New York Presbyterian in New York City.
In New York City, overlooking the George Washington Bridge, for those who know New York. Yeah, my recovery room was on the 7th floor, literally overlooking the George Washington Bridge.
That's kind of a pretty view. I've been over that bridge many times.
Yeah. Yeah, that cluster of buildings, that's all New York Presbyterian now.
Yeah. It's also kind of a scary area, as I recall, if you turn the wrong way when you get off of that bridge. Does that make sense?
Not
to you?
anymore. No, not
No?
anymore. It's
Okay.
it is a beautiful, like very gentrified kind of area.
Okay.
It's right on the border of what the Bronx and Manhattan, and it has wonderful restaurants. There's a vibrant like El Salvadoran community, or Puerto Rican and El Salvadoran. So there's a lot of cool restaurants in that area. Just a really neat area to be around.
Okay. Yeah. 20, 30 years ago, I can recall that we used to take that way to get to my in-laws' house. I'm digressing here from your story, but, and every single time we got off that bridge and had to turn and go up, my wife lived up in Westchester County, my wife's folks, and she grew up there. We would see a burned out car on blocks
Oh, wow.
underneath the bridge. And one night I was going through with all my youngsters, like 5 and under, in car seats in the back of the car, and I took a wrong turn. It was late at night, like 2 a.m. We were tired, and the next thing I know, we're like in front of some nightclub, and the guy looks at me and he says, "You need to turn around and get out of here."
Mm, mm,
And I'm glad
wow.
that was the guy I talked to.
Yeah.
So no harm ever came of it. And
Yeah.
I
Now
could
there's
not even
bike
tell you where I
riders and
was. Couldn't even tell you
okay.
where I was now. But I know that we came off the George Washington Bridge, took a wrong turn, and anyway. So you're overlooking the bridge, and it's beautiful. And I've been up in that area multiple times since, and it is beautiful. But how did you get the call to know it was time to go?
Ah, yeah, this is the dramatic part. So I was told once I became a candidate, so there's this whole candidate process too. So once you do all the tests, then the doctors all meet together. So you have to talk to that's another thing you have to do. You have to talk to a psychologist, a nutritionist, uh, a social worker. There's just so many people you also have to meet with in addition to all the tests. And again, it's non-negotiable. You have to make time to do all this. And then they all get together in a single room. They discuss your case and they say, yes, you're a candidate. No, we don't think you're going to survive this, or we're going to hold you at this point. So I didn't know what they're going to decide. I get the call. They say, okay, we've decided as a group that you qualify, that you are now a lung transplant candidate. I was kind of at the back of the list. They described how lists work. It was the lung has to fit my 6-foot frame body, my torso. It had to fit the antibodies and the blood type. But they said, so you're in a special case, but you're kind of at the back of the line. Expect a lung transplant within 3 to 6 months. Okay, so I start to tell my friends and family. I also start to tell my colleagues. I start to tell my school, hey, this can happen anytime, but most likely I'll finish out the school year. 8 days. 8 days.
8 days?
I got a call in the 8th day at 11, or no, it was 9:30, 10 p.m. I get a call and they said, the first time you get a call, you're number 2. So there's 2 people who go to the hospital. I was the secondary candidate. That means the person in front of me gets the lungs first if they fit. And if they don't fit, then they want a secondary person to be ready to step in. So my wife and I drive out to New York. So for us, it's a 2.5-hour drive. We get there. I'm totally expecting not to have anything happen. It's like, this is kind of what they call a dry run. I'm like, okay, but I'm totally prepared in case we do get called. The doctor comes in around 10:30. No, so it must have been 11 something like that. PM. It's getting late. Doctor comes in and said, I'm sorry, we did have a fentanyl overdose. We are going to harvest the organs, but they don't fit you. I was like, oh, okay, so let's go home. They're like, no, don't go home because we think we have somebody else. Okay. Second person is a cardiac arrest. They're contacting the family. They also have to do all kinds of tests to make sure the organs are pure of hepatitis and all kinds of other, things, impurities.
Sure.
So they fully test all the organs. They test them. And at about midnight, a little after midnight, they say, oh, I'm so sorry, this person's not going to work for you. I was like, okay, so we're going to go home. No, there's a third person. I was like, oh my God. So now we're waiting. It's around 1 o'clock in the morning. It's another fentanyl overdose. At least that's what I was told. Most likely a young person, and it fits. Everything fits. So here I was ready to go home, like really expecting, okay, 2 didn't fit. Third probably doesn't fit. No, third person fits. They said, here's the gown, take everything off. And I'm like, oh, jaw open, like, is this really happening? Wife and I, we start crying. Luckily my sister was in town, able to be there with the kids. We call her. I also have AFLAC insurance. So, for, taking time off and that I
Disability.
planned ahead knowing this is a possibility. So I got it three years in advance. So I actually had everything, my claim all typed out. I literally hit the send button as soon as they told me. I contacted my school and said, this is actually happening. And then I had to get completely undressed, put a gown on, they kept
The
saying
whole 9 yards.
yeah, they were really strict. Like, do you have any rings on? Do you have any necklaces? Do you have any piercings? Like nothing can be on the body. And they're like, some people come in, I guess, with a belly button ring or something like, and they don't catch it. And they're like, holy cow. Then they have to quickly do surgery to take it out. So I was like, no, that's not me. That's not me. Um, and then, and then I went in. Yeah. So I was in there at about 1:30 in the morning getting an
So
operation.
how did they decide only one lung as opposed to two? Because you had damage, you have damage still in your other remaining original lung, right?
Yeah. So like I said, I was the secondary candidate and the first person got the right lung and I got the left. So we were a match. I guess the other person, I never saw this other person, but the other person was also my blood type, a similar antibody type, and a similar height. So,
Well,
and
if
they
that,
told me,
if that person hadn't been there, would you have gotten two lungs?
maybe there had been somebody behind me. They told me when I was going to be a candidate, most likely it'd be a single lung. They said to get a double lung is rare. I thought that's what I wanted. I'll be honest, John. I thought I wanted a double lung transplant. And then I had to go through the pain of recovery. And I was like, holy hell, if I had two lungs, this would be twice as hard. Oh, like I'm glad I just got a single. It is,
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
hard.
But you're feeling okay. So how do you recover from that? Like what's the first thing you do? And when is it easier to walk to the bathroom than it was before?
Oh, well, you don't get a chance to go to the bathroom. They give you they give you little tubes to pee
Yeah,
into.
no, I get that. But as you're on your road to recovery, right?
Yeah.
If we use your walk to the bathroom as the benchmark,
Hmm.
and you said that was harder than or the same difficulty as running a marathon. How long
Yeah.
post-operation before, wow, it's easier to walk to the bathroom now or walk to the kitchen now than it was pre-transplant?
Yeah. So I was in the ICU for I think 6 or 7 days, which again, I've been told is very short. Some people can range 10 to 20 days. And yeah, so they had this chair, like a lazy boy chair, and they insisted that when I could, I had to get out of bed with assistance because you have tubes all over,
Hmm.
there's beepings and there's, I had, wires and needles in my arms and everything. And they said, get to the chair. That's your movement. And I remember the very first time moving to the chair, I was like, oh, that wasn't so difficult. Like breathing wise, it was difficult with all the tubes and wires, but it wasn't hard. I was like, oh, this is different. Um, when I got out of the ICU and went to the seventh floor, that's when I overlooked the GW Bridge. Then I had less tubes, less wires, less things in my arms, and I started having more mobility to go to the restroom myself. And I was like, oh, this is not this is not that hard. This is not as hard as I remember it being. I
Hmm.
was still coughing, so there's still like when they put the new lung in, that's why I'm coughing right now. There's some irritation in I want to call it the esophagus, but that's probably not right. The tube right here, there's a
Okay.
little bit of scarring and and the lungs think it is an irritation. So I still cough every once in a while. It's funny, just before talking to you, I just hiked the dog. I didn't cough a single time, and then I sit down for the interview and I'm coughing a little bit.
Of course.
Uh, yeah. Um, in any case, yeah, I just remember like even at the very beginning, I was like, oh, this is better. It wasn't perfect, but it was a lot better. And I kept being told, you're not going to reach baseline until a year out. Once I get to March 2025, they're going to measure my lungs. They're like, okay, so this is your new baseline. I'm probably not going to get much better after that, but I won't get worse either. It'll be like my new stability. So I'm at a really good point right now, and I'm only 6 months out. I have another 6 months of healing, and I feel like I'm on a really good trajectory.
So what is the status of your sarcoidosis? Do you still have any traces of it, or are you basically just dealing with the lingering after effects of the scarring?
Well, that's a great question because I asked that and asked that and asked that because I was so worried that my right lung, which is still there, it's shrunk. So that's what happens to an organ that's not often used. It has shrunk, but it's still doing a little bit of work. And I said, is there any chance that the sarcoid is going to transfer to the left? And over, they kept saying, they didn't say no, but they said, we have never seen that before. I was like, that's not an answer. Like, will it, like, I mean, they just said, well, we've never seen that happen before. What they do with the old lung, when they take it out, it turns out they study everything about it. So they send it to Columbia University for students to study, and they dissect it and they study everything. And you know what they found?
What?
No sarcoidosis. It was all lung scarred. So the basically, it's kind of, think of it like a forest fire. So the forest fire completely burned itself out. It just burned itself out through the entire lung and got to a point where there was nothing left to burn. And
Except, so if I could hypothesize for a moment. So if that's the case, then basically what happened is you had a very reduced lung capacity, but the damage wasn't getting any worse. It was just really badly damaged. Then you got COVID, and your body couldn't deal with COVID and the scarring.
yeah,
And
and it just creates more
right,
additional scarring in the areas where this is me theorizing. I
Sure.
think it just created more scarring in the areas that were healthy.
Yeah.
And also when they showed me the scans, it looked like the pathway of the main air going in before it gets to all the bronchioli and all that kind of stuff. That main airway was starting to become scarred. That's
Mhm.
what was really, so I could not get air through that area to get to the rest of the lung.
Wow. So I hear you clearing your throat
Yeah.
and so forth. And yet, did you say you just walked 19,000 steps
Yeah,
this
yesterday was
week?
a great day. Yeah, it was one of those wonderful, high of 72 kind of days and not a cloud in the sky. It was just perfect. And I have a dog over here, Golden Doodle, and he
Uh-huh.
and I we're pals, and I just walked him to death because he had a lot of energy yesterday and I had a lot of energy. So we, whenever I could, I came over and did that. So yeah.
Well,
Um
so I mean, you look fit. I mean, you look thin, but not gaunt. So I would say you look like you're healed and ready to go.
Yeah, that's another thing is that in a lung transplant, you lose a lot of weight.
You do.
So
Okay.
so I was already thin because of the lung scarring and everything that was happening to me. And I lost 30 pounds. I was down to 150, which for a 6 foot frame, that's
Wow.
really,
That's really
I
thin.
looked really gaunt. I really did. I looked so thin, painfully thin. And I've only gained 12 pounds back. I mean, once I got my appetite back, which is another story, appetite is another hardship to get back. But once I got my appetite back, then I started eating everything and I also had strange cravings I've never had before. Um, Lots of cravings and I just would just eat everything. I eat anything I want to because I'm just so thin. I need the fat. So I was, there was a time in my life where I was a vegetarian for I think 14 years. I've never eaten pig or cow in all that time. And when I came out of the hospital, I was like, I must have beef. It was like the weirdest feeling. And I was like, yeah, give me the hamburger, give me whatever. I just craved anything with fat in it.
Well, and protein, right? I mean, your body needs protein to rebuild itself. So,
Yeah. And healing's not linear. That's another thing I always tell people. So once I was getting better in one area, then I would start having like GI issues. And I'm like, this is weird. And I had like, and then once the GI issues finally settled out, then it was something else. Like, oh my God, can I just get to a point where everything's kind of working? And to this day, there's like weird little things happening here or there. And then that part will go away and then something else will replace it. I'm like, oh my God, now I have this. So it's the healing process. I'm still in that process. I feel good. I'm doing well, but I also know that there's a lot farther to go.
wow. So what's your headspace like right now? Have you had to go see a psychologist or a therapist, or are you just fat and happy and just so glad to be on the other side of it?
I saw a therapist for 3 years. I paused during the operation. I haven't gone back. I was told by social workers and psychologists, like a lot of people feel depression after this. These are the signs. A lot of people feel a lot of guilt because somebody had to die in order for me to live. Um, I haven't felt those things. I've looked for the signs, but I haven't. Everything that they've told me, I've scrutinized in myself. I'm like, I will go see somebody if I really need to, but I haven't needed to so far, and I will get to a point where I go back and seek therapy. But I feel like I'm seeing so many doctors and I'm doing so many appointments. Like right now, it's nice to have a clear head and be focused on the healing. So, yeah, I'm very fortunate that I haven't felt a lot of those feelings. I was in a group with a group of people, and there was one woman who was just talking about how much guilt she felt. And while I understood her perspective, I didn't feel that same guilt. It wasn't like I caused the person to die. Um, I was just a beneficiary of a death that was already going to happen.
Do they share any information with you about the donor other than
Uh,
the fentanyl overdose?
no, if I wanted that information, at the 6 point mark, I can write a letter to the hospital. They will pass it on to the family, and then the family gets to choose to write back or not. And I've thought a lot about this, and I'm like, I don't need that. That's not something I want or need. I don't need um, that contact. I'm perfectly happy knowing that that person who passed away, part of them still lives in me, and I feel, and again, I'm unusual in that respect, but that's how I've kind of categorized it in my head.
Yeah, no, you know what? I think that's okay. I mean, that's my opinion.
Hmm.
I can totally see where you would come down there. And I don't know, part of me is thinking in the background, it was a fentanyl overdose. Somebody did something they weren't supposed to do. And yeah, it wasn't like an innocent victim in a car accident or something. I don't know. It's a little less innocent in my mind, even though we've done, of course, working as a television reporter, journalist, we do stories weekly on people who just experimented with a drug once and it
Hmm.
happened to be laced with fentanyl. They weren't quote unquote bad people. They weren't
Yeah.
drug addicts. They were at a party and somebody gave them a pill and they died.
Yeah.
So and I don't want to go down that road because that's a whole different road, but
Yeah.
uh
I think I'd feel the same way even if it was a car accident.
uh-huh.
I've actually been There was a time in my life where somebody had a car accident in front of me. I stopped and I actually was with them until they died. I kept talking to them. We called the ambulance. It wasn't coming on time, and I watched them pass away. And I think that even if it had been something like that, I wouldn't feel the guilt. It would just be, I'm sad that this happened to them, and I am sad that this happened to this person. But again, I'm the beneficiary, and part of them lives on in me. That's kind
And
of how I
at
put it
least
in my
their
brain.
life was well lived and there was an opportunity there for them to help somebody else,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So back to sarcoidosis, are you still seeing anybody about sarcoidosis, or is pretty much all of your medical treatment now related to recovering from the transplant?
Most of it is still with New York Presbyterian. I'm my pulmonologist at Yale University, which Dr. Galati, I have so much respect for. Love her. She's fantastic. I know you've talked a lot about the Cleveland Clinic, but for anybody out there in New England, Yale and Dr. Galati, they're just fantastic. I did see her just recently, and she reviewed all my records, reviewed everything, and she said, Wade, I got to tell you, they did everything right. She's like, I just cannot believe how well they've treated you, how well they have advised you. She's like, they've tested for all the right things. I can't add anything else. Like they've done right by you. And it felt reassuring. So I do continue to go see her from time to time, but it's not as regular. Most of my appointments are with New York Presbyterian too. I have to have very frequent check-in. So when you first start, it's every week, then it's bi-weekly, Now I'm starting on monthly, and after the 1 year mark, then it becomes every 6 months.
So your advice then because the vast majority of people with sarcoidosis have pulmonary,
Yeah.
it's somewhere between, I think, 80 and 90%. I've heard different statistics, but it's the vast majority of people.
hmm
How does somebody know when it's time to start getting on these lists and asking for that level of
Mm.
consideration?
Well, one, if your doctor talks about lung transplant, that's when you need to start seeking out, well, how do I become a candidate? That's number one. Number two, I remember you interviewed a young lady. I want to say she was from the UK, and she could barely go down the steps.
Hmm.
She would walk back and forth in the house. When you get to that point where that's the maximum you can do, and I'm very proud of her being able to do that. Like at that point, you need to seek out treatment for being a candidate for lung transplant because yeah, when you can't do the normal functions, certainly if you're on disability primarily because of pulmonary sarcoidosis, if you get to that point, again, lung transplant might be an option. And again, it depends on your comorbidities, what else you have going on, but um, yeah, seek that out because it is, and that's my message. That's why I wanted to come on today is like, there is hope. Even if you get to that dangerous red line position, there is hope that you can continue to live and prosper.
And one of the things that I have found, even with good doctors and good medical systems, is you have to be your own advocate. You have to step up and ask these questions.
Mhm.
And so, someone could be going to see a very good physician,
Mhm.
but they're feeling the way you just described. They, as the patient, in my opinion, need to bring up, am I a candidate for a lung transplant? What is it
Yeah,
going to take? How much worse do I need to be before you think I should start going down that road, at least
exactly.
preparing for it? And like you said,
Yeah.
you have AFLAC. I'm surprised you were able to qualify for AFLAC having a pre-existing condition like you had.
So I did tell them, so this was 3 years ago. Aflac is not a good company. I'm not going to advertise them, but they told me that I would have to pay for a full year of Aflac before I could ever reach any benefits because I had this pre-existing condition. So they
Ah,
didn't deny me, but basically I got it thinking that maybe back then I'd have to get a lung transplant. And they're like, oh, no, it doesn't work like that. And I was like, oh, they were a difficult company to work with. They took a long time to process my claim. They didn't give me the proper paperwork until it was convenient for them to give me, oh, you got to fill this out. Your doctor has to fill that. I was like, oh my God. But I did get the claim settled. I didn't, they didn't give me the amount of money that they had advertised. But it was enough. It was completely enough to satisfy what we needed at that time.
well, God
Oh, and
bless you.
another thing, I do want to just mention one other thing.
Yeah.
If anybody's going through this process, have someone create a GoFundMe as well, because there may be expenses that you don't know that
Hmm.
just pop up.
Hmm.
That's another thing that would really benefited us is that we had a lot of family and friends come out of the woodwork to help us out. I might get a little emotional because so many people were so generous, and it really, really helped with all those unexpected things like that you just don't ever think about, and you're waiting for some kind of payout from like Aflac or something else, and you're like, oh, what are we going to do? And you can't. I couldn't take that stress. I mean, when you're recovering, you can't have any stress, and so yeah, that GoFundMe really reduced all of our stress, knowing that okay, we have something to fall back on, and as unexpected things popped up, it's like, oh, we can use this for that.
We see that a lot with school communities. Was that school related or more family related?
It was everything.
Everything, yeah.
I'm very fortunate in my life that I've met a lot of people all over the world, and I love them. They love me, and like I said, that I'm going to get teary again. The generosity was just so overwhelming. I can't remember, over 200 people contributed. It was a big thing. that I didn't expect. I was expecting maybe a couple of dozen, and yeah, I got a lot of lovely notes saying, how much I had touched lives. I'm a teacher, so I
Sure.
also had former students who are now grown-ups because I've been in this profession for 20 years, 23 years to be exact. And so former students stepped up, colleagues stepped up, friends, family stepped up. It was an amazing thing.
Is that account still active? The GoFundMe account?
I think it is. We never closed it. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's still up and running.
Yeah. Do you have
I don't,
residual medical bills that are not taken care of yet, or are you all right?
uh, I, I have met my deductible. And so the insurance really has taken up a lot of, so it won't renew, I think, until November, is it November 1st, December 1st, something like that. Once that happens, yes, we're going to rely on the GoFundMe to kind of get back all the deductible that we're going to have to pay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so far, and my wife keeps telling me, oh, the unexpected is going to happen. Just wait. Another shoe is going to drop. You just wait. And I'm a little more optimistic. I'm like, no, I think that's it. I think that's, we've passed the hardest part. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she's right. I don't know. But the GoFundMe has given us a little padding so that if something unexpected does happen, we have something to fall back on.
Great. Wade, is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
I just want to say there's hope, especially for those of us who are in that last third category and we're worrying about, not just living for ourselves, but living for, I have 2 young kids, and you feel sometimes you're like, I just can't go on. I just can't keep doing this. This is too hard. There is another option. There's always something else. And that's why I wanted to come on this podcast. And I wanted to say there is hope. The numbers for transplant don't look good, but ignore that because each case is different. They give a lot of lung transplants to people who are like 75 years old. So a lot of the numbers you're seeing when you see dire numbers of people not surviving this, it's because their bodies can't handle it. But take your case as a single case initiative. And also, like you said, advocate, advocate, advocate. When doctors try to persuade you not to do this, you're like, no, this is what I think I need. So that's my message today.
Wade, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I'm so happy to hear about your great outcome, and keep hiking, okay?
All right, I sure will. Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Wow, I got to tell you, Wade has been through it, and yet just 6 months out, he's looking great. He's out there walking the walk for sure. He said he did 19,000 steps just this past week, and I think that's just shy of 10 miles. So good for him. He's still got some work to do. His GoFundMe is still active. I've put a link in the show notes or what you would call the description of this podcast. And I expect that he's going to have some pretty hefty bills going forward, despite the fact that he's doing so well. Even if it's just the testing, the MRIs, the PET scans, whatever they need to do to monitor his health. And I'm sure he would appreciate a donation. And that's only if things continue to go well. If things go south, he's going to need a lot more money. And I'll be sure to let you know if he lets me know, which I anticipate that that he would. We're in good touch with one another right now. But yeah, let's continue to pray for Wade and wish him the best wishes that we can. I want to ask you a question. Have you checked? And if you wouldn't mind, would you check and see if the early episodes of the Sarc Fighter podcast have returned to the app that you use? As you know, the apps were disappearing as I uploaded new episodes, and I've been working with Podbean. They've been very good. They're the hosting site for the podcast, and I think that I have things resolved. But if you have a second, would you go back to whatever app you use to view the podcast and see if you can download episode 1 or episode 2, any one of the early episodes? Because what was happening is every time I uploaded a new episode after I got above 100, it was deleting an old episode. And I figured out what was causing that, but there's a reset function that I'm not sure that I've done properly. And since when I sign in, I don't know if it sees me as the host or as just a random person who doesn't have sign-in privileges. If you wouldn't mind doing that just so I can double check, I would appreciate it, and send me an email and let me know if I need to keep working on it at carlinagency@gmail.com. Thanks a lot for that. And the official Sarc Fighter song is called Zombie by Mark Steyer and his band The White Hot Lizards. You can hear Mark's story, the story behind the lyrics, in episode 12, which again should be live once again, and please let me know if it's not. And then Mark just joined me not too long ago, a couple episodes ago, for the with episode 118, where he gave us an update on his condition, and he's had kind of a tough run of it. And also his wife is raising money for FSR because she will be running the New York Marathon as a fundraiser for FSR. So go back and listen to episode 118, get caught up with Wade, but thanks again, with Mark once again, and thanks again to him for the wonderful song called Zombie, which is the theme song here on the podcast. The podcast comes out every other Monday. As I'm speaking today, I have 3 trusty dogs. My boxer Dougal is curled up on the chair in my office. My other rescue dog, Shandy, who is just a Heinz 57 from the SPCA, is right at my feet, and my utility dog, Pippa, who is a terrier mix, is also in the office today. All 3 of them helping me do the podcast. The backstory to the founding for the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research is episode 11 with Andrea and Redding Wilson. Don't forget to follow the Sarc Fighter or Sarc Fighter on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Peloton as Sarc Fighter. My blog, Carlin the Cyclist, has a section called Cycling with Sarcoidosis. And if you're new here and just trying to figure out what sarcoidosis is, go back and listen to episode 2 with Dr. Simon Hart. My story is episode 1. And once again, you're always welcome to send me an email in the show notes, carlinagency@gmail.com, if you'd like to appear on the podcast, or if you have a thought for the podcast. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep fighting.
Learn to suffer, you feel pain someday. Learn endurance, your strength will fade away. Dead man walking, trying to keep up the pace.